Hi, this is Wayne from the Ball and Breakfast podcast. Pat is out tonight, but we do have a special guest here. We have Jennifer Garret. Jennifer Garret, she's a host of the Move the Ball podcast. She's an author of Move the Ball and Dominate the Game. She's also a branding consultant, Army lawyer, real estate agent, business coach. The list goes on. And that's just a couple of like her business endeavors that she's going on with. But yeah, Jennifer, happy to turn it over to you. I know you have like 8 degrees or something like that, but would love to hear, kind of your story, everything you've been working on. How did you get all these degrees, et cetera, et cetera?
Yeah, well, first of all, thanks so much, Wayne, for having me on. I'm looking forward to chatting with you today. And so I have 7 degrees, so not quite 8, but
I was shortchanged. Okay, yeah.
But yeah, so I mean, for me, I've always been someone who's enjoyed learning. That learning doesn't necessarily need to be formal education and academia specifically, but I did like that. And I was fortunate enough to have employers that paid, and they had very generous employee tuition reimbursement programs. And so I was like, well, it's a benefit, so why not leverage it? And so 4 of my 7 degrees were fully paid for by employers. And also I looked at it as another way that I could differentiate myself when it comes to, as I'll say, moving the ball and progressing in your career. The further we go in our career journey, it's really about how are you setting yourself apart from your competition and from the others that are also trying to get those jobs, right? So for me, I figured that getting the education would help because it would bring other perspectives to the table, which would allow me to have different roles. And then throughout my corporate career, when I worked in multiple Fortune 50 companies, I was always able to be in rooms where I would ask other questions that other people were not thinking about because I had this broad perspective. So for me, it was really a way to continue to set myself apart from others. And also, since I had companies that would pay for it, it was like, why not? It made sense.
Yeah, I mean, that's great. And I feel like it's interesting. So I did some work like with Microsoft and all that. And there would be people like they would do some reimbursements and such, but they would never capitalize on that because they were so much, I guess, focused on their actual job and everything. And it's like, well, what about the next 5-10 years, I think, down the line there. So that's great. And then I guess, how did you take all of that? And then I know you're doing some things like with athletes and sports and all that. How did you take all that, working for Fortune 50 companies and that educational, I guess, olive branch, if you will, for all your future endeavors? How do you take all of that and then transition it into, I know you do some things like with brand consulting in the sports world and also your podcast now. Yeah. How did you transition all that?
That's a great question. And I'll have to say that it's something that it wasn't part of the plan, so to speak. So when I wrote my first book, Move the Ball, so I've always been a football fan ever since I was a kid. Growing up in Chicago, I had, the 85 Bears and really fell in love with the game at an early age and took away so many lessons and strategies that can help you in just life, right? To be successful. And so I wrote this book, Move the Ball, where I shared a lot of that. Thought, I would love to kind of get involved in sports, but I knew nobody, had no contacts. And so I was like, one day we'll see. But it was not like a focused effort, like, yeah, this is what I want to do and I'm going to go after it. But I just started building my network. And one of the things that I think I do well is connecting with other people. And so I started, showing up to events where there would be people in the professional football space, whether coaches or players or former players or whatever. And I just started networking. And over time, people started listening to really understand and learn what I had put in the book. And then just opportunities came from there. And so for me, it was always like, that'd be really cool to do if it happened, but it wasn't like that was the primary focus. And then just over time, as I continued to build more and more connections, then it was like, okay, now that I have those industry contacts, let's really focus more on that space.
Got it. Okay. So it was really just like networking, reaching out to contacts, to people that you might have seen. I see your LinkedIn game. You're posting a lot of, great stuff out there, like pictures with athletes, Ryan Clark, who I like, and all that too. So no, that's awesome that you're able to kind of just connect and kind of, I guess, leverage, for lack of a better term, like leverage those relationships moving on forward. So I guess in terms of like career advice that you have maybe for listeners, because you definitely had, that Fortune 50 experience and then was able to, I guess, pivot more to kind of what you're currently doing right now, like what kind of career advice do you have for maybe there's college listeners out there, or maybe some young professionals out there who maybe just aren't happy with their job, or maybe they're looking
Sure.
for some inspiration out there?
Yeah, I think that first, I mean, I think it's important for people to know that they deserve to have the career that they want and they shouldn't just settle for jobs. And it's really about putting that plan together, that playbook, right? And how am I going to get to the jobs that I want, and having that 5, 10, 15-year view and identifying, okay, these are the skills that I have today. These are the skills that I need to get to where I want to go. How can I obtain those skills? What are the things that I can do, whether it's different jobs or it's getting mentorship or classes or whatever it is? How do I fill those gaps to have the skill sets to get to where I want? And I think for me, like something that I always knew at an early age was I had to take charge of my career. Nobody else was going to be looking out for me. And that's where I come across a lot of people. They assume that their manager is going to be looking out for their development and growth. A good manager will be, but there's still going to be a limitation on that, not because the manager doesn't care, but they're busy. They have other employees, they have their work tasks. So there's only a certain amount that they're going to be focused on your growth and development, and it's really up to you. The other thing that I think is important is the network. People say that your network is your net worth, or your net worth is your network, right? And in today's day and age, it is so easy to connect with people in person or virtually. I mean, you could really connect with anyone across the planet, right? With tools that we have today, Zoom and Teams and LinkedIn and these platforms to try to build these relationships. So I would really encourage people to start thinking about who are the types of people that I want to network with, not for who can help get me a job. There's a time and place for that, but it's who can I learn from? Who can I grow from? Who can I just build friendships and connections with? And over time, if there's a time and a place for them to help you, that's great. But I wouldn't go into trying to connect with people for what can they do for me. It's about building that relationship. And I mean, you can, if they are someone that is more senior
Yeah,
in their
no,
career, you can ask them, hey, I want to learn from you.
yeah, no, I 100% agree. I think, somebody actually asked me about what is my approach towards like networking events. It's oftentimes like I go with the mindset of, because I consider myself pretty well networked too. But yeah, I think I kind of come with the mindset of any type of networking event, fundraisers and stuff like that. Like, oh, hey, so and so's maybe a real estate agent. Oh, I know somebody looking for a house or something. Like maybe I can help them actually, and not really, really look to take anything away from there. But yeah, maybe eventually I go, oh, hey, maybe I am interested or want to know more about the real estate industry during that time. Maybe I'll have a conversation with this person later, something like that, right? And I do like
For
how you
sure.
mentioned like kind of taking charge, because I think taking charge is important there too. I think I forgot who said this, but it was like having your own board of directors, I think is pretty important, like your own
Mm-hmm.
personal board, whether it's, a mentor and maybe, other people, mentors in different capacities of life, or, maybe one more professional, some relationships, some, athletics or a personal trainer, etc. So, no, that's awesome. So I mentioned all the things you're doing and all. I mentioned brand consultant, army lawyer, etc. How do you time manage all that? Do you use Google Calendar? Do you use, Monday.com project management system? Kind of want to know more about that side of your world there.
Sure. Yeah. And before I answer that, I just want to touch on the mentoring thing, because I think it's important that we have mentors, but also we should have champions and sponsors too. And there's a difference. So a mentor is someone that is supposed to guide you and give you advice on different topics, but it's not their job to look after your career and to help you grow and get that next job. A sponsor or a champion, on the other hand, are people that are going to go to bat for you, that are going to help you get in rooms that you otherwise would not get into because you just don't have that exposure or visibility. So I think both of those types of people are very important. So I just wanted to draw that distinction as well. And then to answer your question about how do I manage it all? Well, I have my Apple iPhone, so I have my calendar on that. But aside from that, it's really about what are you putting on the calendar. And so for me, I am a very big fan of planning out your weeks. And so on Sundays, I'm planning out, okay, what do I want to get done this week? Like, what's the objective for the week? And then making sure that the things that I have filling my calendar are in alignment with that specific objective. And if it's not in alignment, then maybe that task or that meeting should be done another week. Because what happens is we tend to fill our calendars with so many things, and we're trying to do a lot more things than we're going to have time to really complete and do it effectively, right? So if we can just prioritize what are the things that are important this week, then we'll also reduce that feeling of overwhelmingness and stress, because we're like, okay, that other thing, I'm going to work on that next week because that's not the priority for this week. Or sometimes we have people that love to task us with things, right? If we're in the workplace and someone says, hey, I need you to do this for me, I need it ASAP. Well, do you really need it ASAP? So I'm very big on pushing back when someone has a deadline. Like, is it critical to get it done now? Or can it get done another day or another week? And it's just having a conversation with someone to really identify what is the critical need. And if it's not that critical, then you push it off. And if it is, then it's just about readjusting priorities.
Got it. Yeah, no, I think that's time managing is essential. So yeah, like saying no to this, saying maybe not now to this is essential, especially if you're juggling so many different type of projects all at once. So yeah, I think that all makes sense there. I think there's like an octalysis, or not the octalysis model. Forget Amazon uses something like that. They use like a quadrant of some sort, Eisenhower matrix, right? On that, like what is uh important versus what is urgent and administrative, et cetera, et cetera. So, no, I think that all sounds good there. Want to get more into your podcasting right now. I know you have your own podcast, and I've listened a couple of times. A lot of awesome athletes in there. How did you get all started with that?
Sure. Yeah. So there were a number of people who were either former NFL players or current ones that were like, Jen, you should start a podcast. And at the time, I was like, this is probably early 2019, late 2018. And I was like, no, there's so many podcasts out there. How am I going to differentiate myself from all the other ones? So I wasn't really on board just yet. Fast forward till later in 2019, I had people continuing to mention, hey, Jen, you should do this. And so I was like, you know what? Let's give it a go and let's kind of see where things go, not knowing where the journey would take me. And so, yeah, so I mean, for me, it was really about, okay, let me try this thing that was new for me, podcasting. And podcasting is great because it allows you to build relationships with people and strengthen relationships that you already have by doing this thing, this podcast, right, where you're sharing a conversation on some topic of interest. And so for me, it was, let's try it. And it really helped me to actually propel my brand when it came to the sports world, because then more and more people that were pro athletes or college athletes were checking out the show or seeing it because people were posting about it. And so it was really one of the big things that helped me to continue to make a name for the Move the Ball movement when it came to sports specifically.
Yeah. I guess the question there is, why move the ball? Like that seems to be your mantra. I just kind of popped up there. Yeah. Why did you choose that as like the name, like kind of as your brand, I think it was the name of your first book, your podcast. What does that sentiment mean to you?
Yeah. So when I was writing my first book, how that came to be was I was at a Chicago Bears, Green Bay Packers NFC Championship game in 2011. And the Bears, in their typical Bears fashion, were losing. But and also in typical Bears fashion, we're not out of it. Like either they're just right there, right, giving you hope, or they're just sucking completely. So they were right in there. And so the Bears had the ball. It was fourth quarter, and they were driving down the field, and I don't remember what the score exactly was, but they were still in it. And then it was fourth down. So Lovie Smith calls a timeout. And it was in that moment that I thought about how we all have fourth down moments in our own lives. And we have to decide, are we going to go for it or are we going to punt? If we are going to go for it, what play are we going to run? Right. And obviously in our own lives, we have more than one play. But that was really what gave me the thought of the book. So then I started, the Bears lost, the Packers went on to win the Super Bowl, and I had this idea for the book. So I started jotting down all of these different lessons and strategies that I had taken away from football over the years. And so then I had idea for the book. So what do you call it? Right. And so I was thinking about, well, what is it that I'm really trying to help people to do? And it's like, it's to help them move the ball forward when it comes to their own life. And so that's how I came up with the name, not knowing that that was going to end up becoming a podcast and a whole movement and a way of thinking for people. So it's kind of interesting how things just tend to stick with people as well.
Yeah, like that moment in time really resonated with
Hmm.
you and then has transitioned to like, oh yeah, like, what, like 10 years later, like, oh, I'm
Hmm.
gonna call a podcast based off of that feeling that I had. Was that like the Jay Cutler years? Am I getting that correct now? Or
Yeah.
like
Yes.
2011?
Yes.
Okay, yeah. Yeah, with that Alshon and Brandon Marshall, etc. So Julius Peppers, great defensive end too, and the last year's Urlacher, I think, too, as well. So
Hmm.
who
Yeah.
was your favorite? Who was your favorite Bears player when you were growing up or during that time?
Well, of all time, it's Walter Payton, which is a common one for many people, but it's not just about Walter's character and who he was on the field. It's obviously the impact that he made off the field as well. And so I, like many other people, have that. There's no unique reason why he's my favorite, but obviously for just how he touched, Chicagoland and the things that he did and the impact that he made, he was just one of my favorites growing up.
Gotcha. And I guess since we're on the topic of the Bears and everything, like, what's your take on the whole situation of the Bears, where they're at right now? Is there hope? What are your thoughts? Should they blow it up? What do you think?
Well, during training camp, everyone was excited. Just like every year, we're hopeful that this is going to be the year they turn it around. And obviously, the first game they played the Packers and they still didn't, do very well against Jordan Love. And so it was just a signal of what was to come, right? And it's just continued to be very, I don't want to, I won't swear, but a very
You
disappointing
can-
performance that, as a Bears fan, you hope that they're going to get better. And it just seems like I read something the other day that when you look at from a point differential between them and their opponents in the first 3 weeks, like they are the worst. So not only do they have an 0-3 record, they are the worst, the largest point differential of any team in the National Football League. And so I remember talking to people before the season, like, yeah, this is going to be the year and we can't get any worse than we were. And unfortunately, we are. And so it's quite disappointing. It's kind of like, what is it going to take to turn it around? And, is there hope for them this year? I mean, I don't think that they're going to turn it around and have a stellar season. I mean, can we win some games? I sure hope so. But it's tough to watch. I will say that last season was the first. I used to watch every single Bears game, and I would watch it to the end. It didn't matter if they were trailing by 3 touchdowns, if they were still in on. I would watch till the game clock hit 0. And last year was the first time that I did not watch the game till the end because I was like, this is so awful. It was too painful to watch. And then we talk about managing our time. I'm like, I have other things to be doing that's more productive for my business. So you know what? I'm going to go focus on those things. And I mean, the same thing this year, like the game for week 3, I had it on and I was like, I'm going to watch something else. I can't do it. It's painful.
Yeah, no, I had the same sentiments I think last season. And to be fair, it seemed like they were tanking too, because they got rid of Roquan, they got rid of
Mhm.
Robert Smith or Robert Quinn, I should say. So like it seemed like they were kind of tanking there. So I was like, okay, I just won't watch the games. That's totally fine. I'll watch the highlights. Justin Fields or whatever, like throws a nice pass, etc., or scramble is great. Some progress there, but yeah, it was. I was like, I'm gonna do grocery shopping. I'm gonna do grocery shopping instead
Mhm.
of seeing,
Right.
yeah, like Justin Fields getting sacked for the 8th time or something like that. So, 100% agree on there. And then I guess speaking of that week 3 game against the Kansas City Chiefs, I know there was a lot of, I guess, side conversations that were happening since there was this whole Taylor Swift effect that was coming along there with Travis Kelce, this whole dating rumors and everything. And it's like, lo and behold, Taylor Swift was there in the box sitting next to Travis Kelce's mom. And I think now Travis Kelce's sales are up like 400% or something like that. What's your
Yeah.
perspective on this whole like Taylor Swift, Travis Kelce thing? And do you have any advice too? Like, I don't know if you have any advice on to Travis Kelce and how to navigate the situation, but yeah, just curious your thoughts on everything there.
Yeah, so I mean, it's interesting to see kind of the Taylor Swift effect, right, and this increase in sales. But I mean, Taylor Swift is a global icon. She's a huge influence in pop culture, and just people everywhere across the globe love Taylor Swift, right? My kids love to sing to her songs as we're driving to school in the morning. So I have Swifties in my family, but it's interesting how one person with such an influence can affect consumer purchases, right? And so there she is in the box with his mom, and then he had this spike in jersey sales, 400%. So she's really helped him increase brand awareness, right? Obviously football fans knew who the Kelce brothers were and the mom, but if we're not a football fan, you might not know who he is, but you know who Taylor Swift is. And now that she's been seen at the game and there's all these dating rumors, obviously that's helpful for his brand awareness, driving some sales as well. And I mean, as a brand person that coaches people on their brand, I mean, you want to leverage what exposure you have, and that's positive exposure for him too, right? So leverage it to connect with the fan base, and build those relationships through social media, and then you'll have more fans and maybe drive more sales to come, no matter what happens with Taylor and Travis down the road.
Yeah, because I mean that's the funny part is that like all of a sudden I hear all my female friends who are more so like they're into what maybe the Kardashians are doing, or obviously Taylor Swift, but not necessarily. It's like, oh, like Taylor Swift put this guy in the map. Of course, I'm like, this guy's the number one tight end, like almost
Yeah.
debatably of all time. Like he's the first round draft pick on a lot of people's fantasy drafts.
Mhm.
Two-time Super Bowl winner, right? I don't know how many times All Pro. So, but to that effect, like she's like a multi-billionaire, and he's I think like maybe 100 million, if that, in terms of career earnings so far. So, but yeah, like that's just the whole conversation.
Sure.
It seems like is she's on a different scale. She's global, like you mentioned. Um, so, but no, yeah, that's really cool.
For sure. And the other thing, I mean, we talk about branding, and a lot of things that I work with pro athletes on too is how do you leverage your brand to be successful beyond football, right? And so there might be other opportunities for him that arise aside. I mean, he's in more commercials now, State Farm
Mm-hmm.
and other things as well. Not State Farm was not because of Taylor Swift, but you never know like what other companies are going to want to work with him because of this increased exposure, right? So you want to leverage that. Football, the NFL, people joke about that it stands for not for long, right? And the average NFL career is 2.5 years. Obviously, both Kelce brothers, have had a longer career than that, but you never know when it's going to come to an end. So you want to maximize the opportunities that you have while you're still playing in the league to set you up for that success beyond football.
Yeah, and yeah, I know he like you mentioned, he does have the podcast. They've been promoting too. It's kind of like this net effect of everything that's been happening in the past couple of months for Travis specifically, but yeah, both Kelsey's, in that they have obviously their podcasts, and I think it just reached 1 million subscribers now, at least on YouTube, I believe. But then they have that movie Kelsey on Amazon Prime. They were promoting that
Mhm.
too, all within the same month. So from the Kelsey perspective, it was like this whole thing, and then all of a sudden, uh, uh, Taylor Swift blew it out of the water, like went to a different stratosphere there. So it's kind of interesting how that all transpired. But yeah, it sounds like the branding perspective. Like, is there, if you were to give any other advice towards, I guess, athletes that might be listening here, from this whole Kelsey thing and wording, and maybe just the Kelseys in general in terms of the career, because they're doing other ventures apart from their their current playing careers. Like, what other advice do you have for maybe some current athletes, whether it be for the Kelseys or other athletes that you might want to talk about?
Sure. And also, what I'm about to say really applies to any of us, whether we're an athlete or not. And it's really about the power of relationships and that networking. And, it can, one person can totally elevate where you're going or change the direction of where you're going, right? I mean, just like this Taylor Swift effect. Now, don't expect to see that exact same result. However, it's about network, and you never know what relationships you're building with other people could be the one that really helps position you for success, right? Not that you're going out there looking for people to use them. Again, it's about mutual benefit, connecting, building relation, but you just never know who is going to be that person that can really be that game changer for you. So that's one thing. The other thing too is we all should be mindful of our brands, right? And for NFL athletes, as an example, you want to leverage the fact that you are an NFL player to the maximum extent possible, because everybody wants to align with NFL players. Why? Because it's cool to be around pro athletes, right? So leverage that now as part of your networking to continue to build relationships, cultivate business opportunities. Now, for someone who might not be an athlete, leverage what you have in your toolkit. Let's say, for example, you went to USC or you went to UCLA or DePaul or wherever you went. Tap into your alumni network and build relationships from the people that you have a commonality with, that you guys went to the same school, because there's a lot of people that like to help alumni, right? Just as an example. Or, if you play some other sport, maybe it's not at a professional level, again, just leverage the things that you have that in your toolkit, in your background, to cultivate those opportunities.
That's great advice. Yeah, whether you're an athlete or not, because I especially I think the idea is like you can never stop networking, right? Even as an adult, whether you're
Yes.
in your 50s or your 20s, whether you're seeking a job or you already have an established job, maybe there's a time of unemployment, or maybe hey, there's another venture you want to do. I feel like there's always an opportunity around the horizon. But yeah, I think going
For
off of
sure.
that whole like college athletes and giving them advice on things like if I am some sort of up and coming athlete, whether NFL, NBA, etc., what kind of advice would you give them, say if they're in high school, maybe entering the college world, with this whole idea of NIL, etc., to kind of get them to stand out a little bit more? What kind of advice would you maybe provide to them as they're going into college and the whole NIL system?
Sure. Yeah. So NIL has been around for a little over 2 years now. So it's still fairly new. And I'm sure there are going to continue to be changes, because there's obviously some negative press about how it's the wild, wild west and how there's chaos. So I think it will continue to evolve. I think it's important to remember too, unless you are someone that has a huge brand, don't lose sight of the fact that you are there to perform, and not only on the court, on the football field or whatever, but also academically, right? Because at the end of the day, you don't know if you're going to go pro. And even if you go pro, you never know when that is going to end. So you want to make sure that you have a strong foundation outside of that, getting a degree or education. And also now with NIL, there's a lot of people that are considering, do I wait to even declare for the draft, as an example, because I'm making money in college and I'm making more money than I might make, if I get drafted as a low round or whatever. So I think you need to look at the bigger picture too. Like, how does NIL affect me? Like, do I think I'm going to be able to maximize business opportunities, or is it only going to be a small income stream for me? And if you're not going to have that many opportunities, because a lot of people are like, oh yeah, NIL's here, I'm going to make a ton of money. That's not everybody, right? There are some schools like the University of Texas, they were trying to get their players some big deals, not just the stars, right? But a lot of people were getting like 150K off of some deal. I don't know all the details, but like if you're only going to make, $500 or $2,000 off of something, like, don't forget you're there for an education and for other things, not just about trying to make money, because there might not be as many opportunities. And I'm not trying to be negative, but it's also a dose of reality too. Like, you need to assess the landscape and don't lose sight of that. The other thing too, I talk with people about like, how does that affect the team dynamic? And you have people that are excited that their teammates are getting paid, but then there's also this resentment too when you have your buddy that's making a lot more money and that's getting all these opportunities than you, and so that really affects team cohesion. The other thing that is interesting, which is in part tied to NIL is the transfer portal and how the rules have changed since what they used to be. And someone sent me an article. It was a guy that played on the Chicago Bears '85 Bears team. He sent me an article the other day, and it basically said that it's harder for high school kids now to get scholarships and recruited, unless you're the creme de la creme, because you have all these other kids in the transfer portal that are trying to go elsewhere. So if I have options from the transfer portal and those kids have already played at the collegiate level, so they might be more developed, right, than someone coming out of high school, depending on what your star rating is and things like that. I'm going to go in the transfer portal instead of getting a kid out of high school because I don't have to develop them as much, potentially. So there's some interesting dynamics going on with that. The transfer portal can also, tying it back to NIL, a kid may want to transfer for a number of reasons, including the NIL opportunities.
Got it. Yeah, no, I mean that sounds that sounds pretty nuts. I think and it is in
Yeah.
its infancy. I'm definitely much more in favor of having the NIL, but then let's fine tune it some because and I think that was like the whole apprehension about providing this whole thing of NIL as opposed to not paying the players whatsoever. And then we had this whole Johnny Manziel type of fiasco where right, I think it was the Texas A&M. They raised like $750 million compared to the SEC, who that same year after Johnny Manziel won the Heisman, they raised like $250 million as a whole SEC outside of Texas A&M, and Johnny Manziel saw zero of that. So I get that's like the main reason for the NIL, and then now we're transitioning to the NIL, and then now we're fine tuning it, but obviously, there's a lot of work to be done, and I'm glad you brought this whole transfer portal. Because it seems like there's an opportunity, there's an opening now with this whole like Colorado and like Deion Sanders now. Like they had a bunch of transfers kind of coming in there because they knew that would be great for their brand, being in the limelight. Now they're getting primetime viewing. I'm on DraftKings. I do my whole DraftKings thing. There's like a whole section just for Colorado. So, it seems like with social, seems like with how the media, like nobody has attention spans more, but it's like if you can be in the limelight now, is it like the rich are getting richer? You think with regards to the USCs and all that, and then if you are a top athlete as well, you can kind of just have all the negotiating power and go anywhere.
Well, I mean, I think that I'm not the expert here, but I do think that players should get paid. They should be able to capitalize on their name, image, likeness, right? So I think that's great. I think there should be some more regulation around that. But as it is today, I mean, I think if you are a player and you can get those mega deals, and I mean that's your brand, you work hard, you have the talent, then leverage that to get what you're worth, right? I mean, anybody else outside of sports would do the same thing, right? In the corporate world, we're trying to get as much as we can as well and maximize our worth. So I think that to the extent that it's allowed, like I do think there will be changes down the road, but right now, I mean, if you're getting a $1 million deal while you're in college, good for you, because that's your worth, and someone will pay. It's also what someone's willing to pay too, right? If they're willing to pay that, then you're still putting your body on the line, your health on the line. So you could have, game ending, or not game, but a season ending injury that could end up being a significant injury too. So, I mean, I think, get paid to the extent that you can.
Yeah, no, I think my whole feeling, it's like, we're in a capitalistic society. Yeah, why are we doing it? The Europeans have their own system. You got 14, 16-year-old people over there playing professional ball. Like, why does it have to go through all these rigid systems there? So, never really made any sense to me there. So, I guess with the, going back to the Bears in a way and, given your background in real estate, I know the popular talk is now, and I've been trying to keep up with this, and I feel like there's some negotiating tactics happening between the Bears and the city of Chicago, and I know they got the whole the Arlington Heights racetrack and everything. Kind of curious your opinion on how this will affect maybe the Chicagoland real estate market. How what's your viewpoint on the Bears and their stance maybe on all this? Just want to hear your thoughts on all that.
Sure. So selfishly, because I live on the in the northwest suburbs of Chicago, I would like them to come closer to Arlington Heights or be in Arlington Heights because that'd be closer for me. But from a real estate standpoint, I mean, obviously there's some negotiation. There's other cities that are trying to place a bid. I don't think they're very successful in that. But in terms of what does that do for the real estate market? I mean, well, first off, I know that there are some people in Arlington Heights that are concerned about like traffic control and all of that when you have on Sundays, because now you're going to have all these people in their neighborhoods. There are other people that aren't as worried about it that I know that are in Arlington Heights. You're not really going to get people moving to, Arlington Heights just because the Bears are now there. So I don't see that as a significant differentiator in terms of volume in the Arlington Heights market, nor do I think you're going to see people selling because, I mean, maybe if you're not a Bears fan, you might want to get out of there. But I think if you're a Bears fan, then you're probably going to stay, and you might even see some capitalistic opportunities, just like people do at Wrigley, and they sell their driveway or their garage for parking spaces on game day. So you might see some of that as well. But there was something else I was going to say about that. Dang it, I lost it. But so I mean, I think that from the economy standpoint, obviously you're going to drive more economic growth in terms of people purchasing, people filling up their cars with gas, and just spending money in the area. So you'll certainly see an economic uptick in the northwest suburbs because people will be coming out there for games.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Sounds good. I mean, do you think it makes sense for the Bears to stick in Chicago versus setting up camp in Arlington Heights? Like, what's your thoughts on, maybe what the Bears ought to do from a business standpoint?
Sure. I mean, so I haven't put too much thought into this, or have I read too much about it? But I mean, Soldier Field is an older field. There's a historic element to it too, right? So from a history standpoint, it's kind of nice to keep them there, just from when you're looking purely at history, not from a business standpoint. Yeah, in terms of, should they move? I don't really. I mean, again, selfishly, I think they should move. But is it better for Chicago for them to stay there? I think from an access standpoint, it might be easier for fans to get there because you can take the train into the city. You don't have to drive. I mean, you could take a train out to Arlington Heights on the Metro as well, but I think it's just logistically, it might be a little bit harder because you only have the one Metro, right? Versus you have all these different color lines to get into the city of Chicago, and people drink at games as well. And so it's better for them to take the train or Uber or something else besides driving home. So it's an interesting question. I think probably from an access standpoint and safety, maybe it's better to stay there, but I don't see they're going to move.
Yeah, it seems like everything is moving towards them moving to Arlington Heights, most likely. But yeah, because I think from the business standpoint, from what I know, the NFL has their hands in it, not just the Bears, but the NFL has their hands in there, right? To like, hey, we'll give you the loan, we'll make the business connections, whatever you need, because in the end, the owners, the rest of the owners, not just the Bears owners, they have a business incentive to own the land that the Bears play, or the property in the area, and get all the revenue growth, right, from restaurants, etc., sportsbook, maybe, etc., all that. So,
sure. I will say that most of my real estate is residential real estate, but this morning I was in a commercial real estate meeting, and so I would have loved to have been in those conversations as the Bears were exploring kind of where do they move to. They didn't think to call me. But I would have found that interesting, just to be part of those discussions and hear kind of the rationale and the thoughts going behind, should it be Arlington Heights or what else? What are the considerations and that kind of thing?
Yeah, we'll post this on social. We'll tag the Bears or whatever, and I'm sure it'll make its way up there or whatever, Or I know you're pretty well connected. Maybe you can, make a few phone calls there and get that clip going. So
no, yes, there you go.
Yeah, that sounds good. I think we're almost at time here, but yeah, I guess want to hear again from the branding perspective. One more thought on talked about players and what they ought to do. Is there a player that like, hey, college students, whether you're NIL or maybe you're a young player, or maybe you're Travis Kelce, like what player do you think has like the best brand out there that that other players ought to be modeling after?
Well, that's a great question. So, I mean, so you've got Patrick Mahomes, right? Which not only is he known as a star on the field, he's really connected with people because of State Farm and all those commercials, and Jake and Aaron Rodgers have been in there too. So it's fun, right? It's really about connecting. And no matter where you are, whether you're an athlete or not, it's about connecting with your audience, right? With the intended people that you're looking to connect with. And so I think that when you look at Patrick, obviously there's been some distractions in Patrick's circumstances with his wife and his brother and stuff. But I mean, when you look at Patrick himself, he tends to be a pretty clean, doesn't get into trouble kind of guy. He's obviously doing well when it comes to compensation on the field, as well as his performance, recent Super Bowl championship. So, I mean, I think he's someone that he doesn't do a ton of other outside of State Farm. I mean, you've seen him do some commercials, but he's involved in a lot of businesses behind the scene and investing and cultivating other opportunities to again, continue to build wealth for his family and his future.
Yeah, because I think he also owns like part of the Royals, if I'm not mistaken, or and then maybe part of the soccer. Like he's investing in Kansas City, like the sports teams, and those are the only ones I know of. But he probably owns, whether restaurants or real estate or other businesses. He's probably invested in all that. And like you mentioned, I don't hear anything outside of good things about Patrick Mahomes. But then I hear about his wife. But I feel like that's kind of reaching in a way, right? It's like, right, the brother, like he's kind of corny on TikTok, big whoop, like that's about it.
Right. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah, but
And I would say there are two other people that I would mention that I think are doing great things, leveraging their brand as NFL players. So the first is Damar Hamlin. I mean, obviously last year the world, kind of saw what happened with him on the field, and I'm sure you're familiar with the amount of donations that were made on his GoFundMe page. I don't remember the exact number; it was like $9 or $10 million, for this fund. And so he's using what happened to him and the platform because I mean, I think he has like 1.5 million Instagram followers. Now I don't know about X, because I'm not really a big X person, but I am on Instagram. And so I mean, he's got a huge following. And is he a star athlete in terms of talent? No, he's not the most talented player, but he had this incident happen and the world came to fall in love with who Damar Hamlin was because of what happened, and the fact that he was saved and everything. And so now he's really using his platform to bring awareness to, what happened and cardiac arrest and all those things, which I think is so important. So I think he has an opportunity and he's leveraging it to make it a positive impact. Another person that many people might not know is a guy by the name of Levi Wallace. Levi he is a defensive back who plays for the Pittsburgh Steelers. He had 2 interceptions in the last game against, who did they play? I just watched it too. But in the last Steelers game, he had two interceptions, and he has a great story in that he didn't have any college offers coming out of high school. And he decided that he was going to walk on to the University of Alabama football team. He wanted to go to Alabama because his dad went there. His dad was in the military. He had GI Bill benefits to pay for school, and he wasn't even thinking about football. And then when he got there, he was like, you know what? Yeah, let me get back into football. Walked on the team, ended up signing as an undrafted free agent with the Steelers, but he's in year 6 now. And so remember, I said the average NFL career is 2.5 years, right? So he certainly surpassed that, but he has a foundation called the Levi Wallace Foundation, and he's always doing so many things to make an impact. But when I look at the content that he posts too on social media, the topics of the content are so relevant for other athletes to look at, considering the rest of life and business, as well as just other people. So I think he's doing a great job. And for him, because I know Levi personally, for him, he really wants to use his time in the NFL. Yes, he's playing football and he's earning a salary, but he wants to be able to make as big of an impact while he's playing football as he can off the field, because he knows that, once you're not playing anymore, people don't pay as much attention to you unless you are a superstar, right?
yeah, no, I think that's great, and it's awesome to see what athletes do after their playing days, and whether it's like broadcast television, or there's some players, they become like CEOs and entrepreneurs, and like some I think even have like become CEOs like Fortune 500 companies too. So there is like ways of leveraging that on your platform and then getting that business acumen, it sounds like. So no, that sounds awesome. Yeah, I guess going on that, are there players that you do admire post career and what they've been able to kind of leverage with regards to their playing career, their network, their alumni, etc.
Well, I will say, because I was going to ask you about the Manning cast, since we're talking about the
Yeah.
podcast, right? And I'm not a huge fan of the Manning cast when it comes to like the content that they say. It's kind of like you're just watching somebody watching them play football. It's not quite the same commentating type of a broadcast. But what I do think that Peyton and Eli are doing well is connectability with the audience, because they make fun of it. I don't know if you've seen, there's been these reels where they're doing like the Manning cast auditions, and they have all these other coaches and players come in, and they're having fun with it. And I think that's the important part, is having fun, and making fun of yourself is one way to continue to keep your audience engaged and wanting to be a part of it.
Yeah, no, I think that's great advice, because everything I've seen with regards to the athletes and how they present them, like the Kelsey podcasts and all the Instagram reels, and similar thing to the Manning cast as well. Like all the Instagram reels and TikToks or whatever, it's really anything about football. Like it's like probably 20%
Yes.
football, and then like 80% them just having fun, kind of BSing and playing around with each other. It sounds like so. Yeah.
Sure. And the thing that I like about having social media now is it allows people a window to see athletes as human beings versus just athletes. And I guess I'll mention one other thing. So Alexander
Mhm.
Madison, running back for the Vikings, you may have seen that he received some very hateful comments after the Vikings game, and he spoke up and was like, "Hey, I'm a person too." And I read some of these comments, and I know Alexander. And so I sent him a note. I'm like, wow, I'm so sorry that you had to go through that. Because I mean, like, some of these comments were like, you should put a gun to your head and pull the trigger because you can't catch a football. And it's like, really? That's what we've become in society, that people have become so desensitized and they just are unfiltered and will say whatever they want. And so I like that social media I don't like that part that allows people to have comments like that, but it allows people to see that, hey, they are individuals. They do have families. They are just like the rest of us. They just happen to be in a more visible type of job, right? That also pays a lot more. But at the end of the day, they're still just like you and me.
100%. Yeah. I mean, it's kind of crazy. I think, I've done social media moderation for Fortune 500 companies, and let me tell you, people forget that we can see everything about you sometimes, if you're on Facebook, whatever. So I mean, yeah, I think that we've gotten so desensitized to comment about people because, they're more so the reason why we didn't win on a bet or something, or a parlay, or we didn't win our fantasy league, as opposed to, oh yeah, they're a father to two beautiful children or something like that. So yeah, we oftentimes forget all those things there. So yeah,
Absolutely.
yeah. Um, yeah. I think we're kind of at time now, but any other thoughts that you want to share? Feel free to plug in anything else. Where can we hear more about you, your podcast? Where can they find it? Anything else you're working on?
Yeah, for sure. Well, thanks again for having me on the show. I've really enjoyed getting to chat tonight. And where you can find me, if you go to getinsidethehuddle.com, that's my website. Everything I do has a sports reference to it. I'm on all the major platforms except X. I don't tweet a lot, or whatever they call it now. But I'm on, LinkedIn is my big platform I'm on. If you just search the hashtag move the ball, you should find me, or even just put my name in Google. So I'm doing something right, because I am the top search and I'm not paying for Google AdWords. So something is being done right. But yeah, you can find me there. I'd love for you to check out the podcast. It's called Move the Ball. It's on all the major podcast platforms as well. And yeah, I mean, if I can ever be a resource, or you want to reach out, I respond to messages. So yeah, just send me a note.
Thank you, Jennifer. Yeah, and with that, that's the Ball and Breakfast podcast here. Feel free to give us a like, subscribe, do all those things, and yeah, definitely follow Jen and reach out to her if you need anything. So with all that, yeah, have a great rest of your night there.